I never thought my own children would look me in the eye and tell me I was no longer welcome in the home I'd lived in for 43 years. But that's exactly what happened on a cold February afternoon in our Denver living room, with my husband Robert sitting beside me, his hand trembling in mine. Jessica, our daughter, stood by the fireplace in her expensive designer coat, her arms crossed as if she were closing a business deal. Michael, our son, wouldn't even meet our eyes as he shuffled papers, legal documents we'd never seen, never signed. "Mom, Dad," Jessica said, her voice cold and clinical, "we've made a decision. The house has been sold." The words didn't register at first. Sold? Our house, the one we'd raised them in, where we'd celebrated birthdays and Christmases, where we'd weathered storms and built a lifetime of memories. "You can't be serious," Robert said, his voice barely a whisper. But the look on Michael's face told us everything. They were dead serious, and they'd already done it. Jessica didn't flinch. "You have two options. There's a state-run nursing home in Aurora with an opening next month. Or," she paused, exchanging a glance with Michael, "there's Grandpa Elijah's old cabin up in the San Juan Mountains, near Creed. It's still technically in the family trust." I felt my stomach drop. Elijah's cabin? That place had been abandoned for over 30 years, a half-collapsed relic on Whispering Pines Ridge that we'd only seen in faded photographs. No electricity, no running water, miles from civilization. It was a death sentence wrapped in a cruel joke. "You're giving us a choice between a government facility and a shack in the wilderness?" Robert's voice cracked with disbelief. "Why are you doing this?" Michael finally spoke, his tone flat and rehearsed. "The market value of this property is too high to let it sit here while you age. We need the capital for our investments. It's just good financial planning." Good financial planning. Our children were throwing us away for money. Jessica handed us a manila envelope. "The cabin keys are in there, along with the deed. You have 2 weeks to decide and move out. The new owners take possession on March 1st. I looked at Sterling, our African gray parrot perched on his stand near the window. He'd been with us for 35 years, a gift from Robert on our anniversary. Sterling squawked loudly, a sharp, angry sound that echoed exactly how I felt. "Bad people! Bad people!" he screeched, his eyes fixed on Jessica and Michael. Even our parrot knew betrayal when he saw it. The next 2 weeks were a blur of packing, crying, and sleepless nights. Friends offered temporary shelter, but pride and shock kept us silent about what our children had done. Robert and I made our choice. We wouldn't go to some sterile facility to wait for death. We'd take our chances with Elijah's cabin, no matter how impossible it seemed. If you've ever been betrayed by the people you loved most, stick with this story, because what happened next in those mountains wasn't what anyone expected, least of all our children. Before we go further, if this resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe. Share your own story of resilience in the comments, because I promise you, this is just the beginning. On March 2nd, with Sterling in his travel cage and everything we owned packed into our old pickup truck, we drove away from Denver, toward the San Juan Mountains, toward an uncertain future that would change everything. The drive to Creed took us 8 hours through winding mountain roads that grew narrower and more treacherous with every mile. By the time we reached Whispering Pines Ridge, the sun was setting behind jagged peaks, casting long shadows across the snow-covered forest. Robert's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had turned white, and my arthritis was flaring from sitting so long in the cold truck. When we finally found the turnoff, barely visible, overgrown with pine branches, my heart sank. The dirt road leading to Elijah's cabin was buried under 2 feet of snow. We had to park the truck a quarter-mile away and hike in, carrying Sterling's cage and whatever supplies we could manage in one trip. The cabin itself was worse than I'd imagined, far worse. The roof sagged dangerously on the left side, and 2 windows were completely shattered, leaving gaping holes through which frigid mountain air poured in. The front door hung crooked on rusted hinges, and the porch steps had rotted away entirely. This wasn't a home. It was a tomb they'd sent us to die in. "Maggie," Robert said quietly, his breath visible in the icy air. "We can still turn back. We can figure something else out." But where would we go? We had less than $800 to our names after the kids had cleaned out our joint accounts. Another betrayal we discovered too late. Pride, stubbornness, or maybe just exhaustion kept me moving forward. "We're here now," I said. "Let's at least see what we're dealing with." Inside was even more disheartening. Animal droppings covered the floor, the ancient wood stove was rusted through, and the furniture, where little remained, had been destroyed by weather and time. There was no electricity, no plumbing, nothing. Just 4 walls barely holding together and a ceiling that dripped melted snow onto the warped floorboards. That first night, we huddled together under every blanket we'd brought, feeding a weak fire in the broken stove with wood Robert scavenged from outside. My joints ached so badly I could barely move my fingers, and Robert's blood pressure medication was running low. We had maybe 3 weeks left before that became a critical problem. The cold was merciless, seeping into our bones and making every breath feel like inhaling knives. Sterling, released from his cage, paced restlessly on his perch. He wasn't his usual chatty self. Instead, he kept flying to the broken back window, squawking urgently, then returning to us, over and over. "Out! Out! Go out!" he'd screech, flapping his gray wings frantically. "Not now, Sterling," I whispered, too exhausted to move. "It's too cold, buddy." But he wouldn't stop. All through that endless freezing night, Sterling kept returning to that window, his black eyes fixed on something in the darkness beyond, something we couldn't see. I lay there in the dark, listening to Robert's labored breathing and Sterling's persistent calls, wondering if we'd made a terrible mistake, wondering if we'd survive even a week in this place. My children had wanted us gone, and now, in this frozen wasteland, I understood just how final their intentions had been. But Sterling knew something we didn't, and by morning, his strange behavior would lead us to a discovery that would change everything. If you're still with me, thank you. This gets better, I promise. Stay tuned.
By dawn, I could barely stand. My knees had locked up completely from the cold, and every joint in my body screamed in protest. Robert looked worse. His face was gray, and he admitted his chest felt tight. We were in serious trouble, and we both knew it. But Sterling was relentless, shrieking and flying between us and that back window like a feathered alarm clock that wouldn't stop. All right, Robert finally shouted, frustrated and exhausted. "What do you want us to see, you crazy bird?" Sterling landed on the broken windowsill and bobbed his head frantically. "Elijah! Elijah!" he screeched, a name we'd never taught him, a name he shouldn't have known. My grandfather had died before we'd even gotten Sterling. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Robert and I exchanged glances. "Did he just say—" I began. Before I could finish, Sterling flew down to the floor near the old wood stove and began scratching at a loose floorboard with his talons, squawking urgently. Robert knelt, prying at the board with stiff fingers. It came up easily, revealing a hollow space beneath, and inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were 3 leather-bound journals. My hand shook as I opened the first one. The handwriting was unmistakable. Elijah Thompson, my grandfather. The date on the first entry read June 15th, 1967. "Robert," I whispered, "these are Grandpa's journals from when he lived here." We spent the next 2 hours reading by the weak morning light filtering through the broken windows. Elijah's words painted a completely different picture of this place. He wrote about his discovery of natural hot springs just a quarter-mile behind the cabin, hidden in a grove of ancient pines. He described the springs in detail, water temperatures ranging from 98 to 104 degrees Fahrenheit, rich in minerals including sulfur, lithium, and silica. But it was one entry that made my heart race. September 3rd, 1968. My arthritis is nearly gone after 6 months of daily soaking. Martha's migraines have disappeared. These springs are a gift, a healing power I cannot fully explain, but I'm grateful for every day. "Robert," I said, my voice trembling with something that might have been hope, "if this is real—" Sterling interrupted with an ear-splitting screech. "Go! Go now! Springs! Springs!" He flew toward the back door, circled, and flew back to us as if he'd memorized the path himself somehow, or perhaps remembered it from some ancestral parrot memory I couldn't begin to understand. We bundled up in every layer we had and followed Sterling into the forest. The snow was deep, and every step sent jolts of pain through my inflamed joints, but Sterling guided us with absolute certainty. He'd fly ahead 20 feet, land on a branch, wait for us to catch up, then fly ahead again. It was as if he could see the path in his mind, or perhaps remembered it from some ancestral parrot memory I couldn't begin to understand. After 20 minutes of difficult hiking, we smelled it first, a distinct sulfur scent carried on the cold mountain air. Then we heard it, the gentle bubbling of water, and finally we saw it. There, in a natural clearing surrounded by towering pines, were 3 pools of crystal-clear water, steam rising in ethereal columns into the freezing air. The rocks around them were stained with mineral deposits in shades of orange, white, and green. The largest pool was maybe 15 feet across, the water so clear we could see every stone on the bottom, and it was visibly steaming despite the freezing temperature. Sterling landed on a rock at the edge of the largest pool and dipped his beak in the water, drinking. Then he looked back at us with those intelligent black eyes, as if saying, "See, I told you." Robert helped me down to the water's edge. We removed our boots and socks with trembling hands, and I dipped my swollen, aching feet into the hot water. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. It felt like every nerve in my body suddenly exhaled. The heat penetrated deep into my joints, and for the first time in years, the constant pain began to fade. Tears streamed down my face, not from pain this time, but from hope. Real, tangible hope. "Robert," I said, my voice breaking, "we're going to survive this. We're going to do more than survive." And in that moment, with Sterling preening his feathers beside us and the healing waters embracing our broken bodies, I knew our story wasn't ending in these mountains. It was just beginning.
The next 6 months transformed us in ways I never thought possible at 72 years old. We established a routine. Every morning at sunrise, we'd hike a path to Elijah's Springs, as we'd started calling them, and soak for 2 hours. Then we'd return to work on the cabin, making slow but steady progress. The changes in our health were nothing short of miraculous. My arthritis, which had crippled me for over a decade, began to recede within the first month. The swelling in my knuckles decreased, my range of motion improved, and by week 8, I could grip a hammer without wincing. Robert's blood pressure, which had been dangerously high, stabilized completely. His chronic back pain vanished, and the color returned to his face. We felt 20 years younger. Sterling thrived too. His feathers grew glossy and vibrant, and he became even more vocal, as if the mountain air and mineral water had energized him. He'd perch on Robert's shoulder during repairs, offering unsolicited commentary. "Good work. Fix it. Careful now." Robert, a retired civil engineer, pored over Elijah's journals like they were sacred texts.
Our grandfather had documented everything: the mineral composition of the springs, the optimal soaking temperatures, even rudimentary plumbing designs he'd sketched but never implemented. Armed with this knowledge and his own expertise, Robert designed a gravity-fed system to pipe spring water directly to the cabin. But we couldn't do it alone. One afternoon while buying supplies in Creede, a charming old mining town 15 miles down the mountain, I met Linda Ramirez at the hardware store. She was in her 50s, warm and curious, and when she asked why we needed so much PVC pipe, I found myself telling her our story. Linda's eyes widened. Hot springs? Up on Whispering Pines? My grandmother used to talk about healing waters up there, but everyone thought it was just a legend. Word spread quickly in a small mountain town. Within a week, volunteers started showing up at our cabin. Retired contractors, carpenters, even a plumber named Tom Chen, who'd moved to Creede for the quiet life. They donated time, materials, and expertise. "You folks are living something special up here," Tom said, installing a new hot water heater. "The least we can do is help you share it properly." By late August, the cabin was unrecognizable. We'd replaced the roof with proper shingles, installed new windows with double-pane glass, and repaired the foundation. Robert's piping system worked beautifully, delivering hot spring water to a newly built soaking tub on an enclosed back porch. We'd even added solar panels for basic electricity and a satellite internet connection, a suggestion from Linda, who said we should document this. The interior became cozy and welcoming. We built bunk beds for potential guests, installed a functioning kitchen with a propane stove, and decorated with Elijah's old photographs and journal entries framed on the walls. Sterling had his own elaborate perch near the fireplace, where he'd greet anyone who entered with, "Welcome! Welcome to Thompson Springs!" We'd named it officially, Thompson Springs Wellness Retreat. It started small. Linda brought her sister, who suffered from fibromyalgia, then Tom's mother with severe arthritis. Each person experienced similar relief after regular soaking. Word spread organically, carefully. We weren't running a business yet, just sharing what we'd found. In September, a reporter from the Creede Chronicle, Emily Santos, heard about us and asked to visit. We were hesitant, but agreed. She spent 3 days with us, soaking in the springs, interviewing locals who'd benefited, and photographing Sterling, who posed dramatically for every shot. Her article, titled "Miracle Springs in the San Juans, Elderly Couple Finds Healing and Purpose in Grandfather's Legacy," ran in late October. It was picked up by the Denver Post, then Colorado Life magazine. Suddenly, we were getting calls from people across the state wanting to visit. We were careful, accepting only a few visitors at a time, never charging money, just accepting donations for supplies. But we were happy, purposeful, alive. What we didn't know was that among the thousands of people who'd read Emily's article were the last 2 people we ever expected to hear from again. Our children had found us.
It was a cold November morning when 2 black SUVs rolled up the newly cleared access road to our cabin. Robert and I were on the porch, sipping tea and watching Sterling hop around in the early snow when we saw them. My stomach dropped before I even recognized the vehicles. Jessica stepped out first, dressed in an expensive wool coat and designer boots, completely inappropriate for mountain terrain. Michael followed, along with 2 men in suits carrying briefcases. Lawyers. They'd brought lawyers to our home. "Mom, Dad," Jessica called out, her voice carrying that same fake cheerfulness she'd used when she kicked us out 9 months ago. "Surprise! We came to visit." Sterling, who'd been happily playing in the snow, immediately flew to Robert's shoulder and let out a guttural screech. "Bad people! Bad people! Go away!" His feathers puffed up, making him look twice his size, and his eyes fixed on Jessica with unmistakable hostility. Robert's hand found mine and squeezed. "What do you want?"
he asked, his voice steady but cold. Michael had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, but Jessica walked right up to the porch steps like she owned the place. "We read about your little project here. Quite the story. Miracle springs, healing waters, people coming from all over Colorado." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We had no idea Grandpa Elijah's property was so valuable." One of the lawyers stepped forward, introducing himself as Richard Blackwell from a firm in Denver. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, my clients have retained me to discuss the legal ownership and commercial potential of this property and the natural springs located on it." "Commercial potential?" I felt my blood pressure rising. "You threw us away like garbage, sent us here to die, and now you want to talk about commercial potential?" Jessica dared to laugh. "Don't be dramatic, Mom. We gave you options. You chose this. And honestly, you've done better than we expected. But now it's time to discuss the future. This property could be worth millions with proper development." Michael finally spoke, pulling out a folder filled with documents. "We've had geological surveys done remotely based on the news articles. The mineral content of these springs is remarkable. With the right investors, we could build a luxury resort, a 100-room hotel, spa facilities, a restaurant. We've already had preliminary conversations with venture capitalists." "You've had surveys done?" Robert's voice was dangerously quiet. "On our property? Without permission?" The second lawyer, a woman named Patricia Chen, spoke up. "Actually, Mr. Thompson, according to our research, the property deed and family trust documents are somewhat ambiguous regarding development rights. We're here to propose a partnership. You continue to live here, we handle the business development, and profits are split 60-40. 60 for you, 40 for us," Jessica added helpfully. "And that's generous, considering we'd be doing all the actual work." I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd raised, nursed through childhood illnesses, supported through every challenge, and barely recognized her. There was no remorse in her eyes, no acknowledgement of what she'd done to us, just cold calculation and greed. "You haven't even asked how we are," I said quietly. "You haven't apologized. You haven't shown even a shred of concern for what you put us through." She shrugged. "You're clearly fine, better than fine. You look healthier than you have in years. So let's skip the guilt trip and talk business." Sterling launched off Robert's shoulders suddenly, flying straight at Jessica's head. She shrieked and ducked, and he circled above her, screaming, "Thieves! Liars! Bad, bad, bad!" "Get that bird under control!" Michael shouted. Robert stood up slowly, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before, a fierce, protective fury. "Sterling knows exactly what you are, and so do we." I stood beside him, my heart pounding. We'd rebuilt our health, our home, our purpose in these mountains, and I'd be damned if I'd let our children steal it. "We need to see those trust documents," said I quietly to the lawyers. "All of them, right now." What they didn't know, what we'd discovered just 2 weeks earlier, while organizing Elijah's papers, was about to change everything.
Richard Blackwell opened his briefcase and spread documents across our porch table. As you can see, the Elijah Thompson Family Trust, established in 1972, designates this property and any natural resources on it as belonging solely to direct descendants who actively inhabit and steward the land, Robert interrupted, pulling out our own folder, one we'd prepared very carefully. "With control passing to those descendants only upon demonstration of commitment to the property's preservation and the family's values." The lawyers exchanged glances. Patricia Chen frowned. "I'm not sure where you're getting that interpretation." "From the original trust document," I said, handing her a certified copy we'd obtained from the county clerk's office in Creede 3 weeks ago.
The one your firm apparently didn't bother to pull. The one that clearly states beneficiaries must reside upon and improve the property for no less than 12 consecutive months before gaining any ownership rights. Jessica's face went pale. What are you talking about? Robert smiled, not a warm smile, but one of grim satisfaction. We've been living here for 9 months, improving the property and documenting everything. We've met the residency requirement. You haven't. According to the trust terms, we are the sole legal beneficiaries and trustees. You have exactly 0 claim to this land or these springs. Michael grabbed the document from Patricia's hands, scanning frantically. This can't be legal. Dad left this property to all his grandchildren. He left it to those who would honor it. Elijah wrote very specifically about his fear that future generations would exploit these springs for profit rather than preserve them for healing. He built in protections. Smart man, my grandfather. The lawyers were now huddling, whispering urgently. Jessica's composure finally cracked. You can't just shut us out. We're your children. You shut yourselves out, Robert said quietly, the day you threw us away like trash. Sterling landed back on Robert's shoulder, bobbing his head victoriously. Thompson property! Thompson rules! I took a deep breath, looking at Jessica and Michael, these 2 people who'd caused us so much pain, but who were still, somehow, our children. Part of me wanted to send them away forever. But another part, the part that had raised them, that remembered them as babies, couldn't quite let go. However, I said slowly, if you truly want to be part of this, if you want to prove you've changed, that you can value family over money, there is a way. Jessica looked up hopefully. What way? Robert and I had discussed this extensively over the past 2 weeks, ever since we'd discovered the full truth about the trust. We knew they'd come, we knew what they'd want, and we'd prepared. You'll work here, Robert said firmly, not as owners, not as investors, as employees, unpaid employees, for 1 full year. You'll help maintain the property, assist guests, clean facilities, chop wood, haul supplies, whatever needs doing. You'll live in the small cabin we're building down the ridge, with basic amenities but no luxury. You'll prove through action, not words, that you understand the value of hard work, family, and service. And Sterling will be the judge of your sincerity, I added, watching my children's faces cycle through shock, anger, and disbelief. If he continues to react negatively to either of you, if he senses dishonesty or ill intent, you'll receive additional duties and restrictions. That bird has better instincts about character than any of us, and we trust him completely. Michael's mouth fell open. You want us to work for free for a year, with a parrot as our supervisor? This is insane! Those are the terms, Robert said, non-negotiable. At the end of 12 months, if you've proven yourselves, we'll discuss, not guarantee, involving you in decisions about Thompson Springs' future. But you'll never own it. The trust passes to worthy stewards, and worth is earned, not inherited. Jessica turned to the lawyers desperately. Tell them they can't do this. Richard Blackwell slowly shook his head, still reading the trust document. Actually, Mrs. Morrison, they absolutely can. This is ironclad. Your grandparents control the property entirely. They can set whatever conditions they want for family involvement. Patricia Chen closed her briefcase with a click. I think we're done here. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson clearly have the legal high ground. The lawyers walked back to their SUVs, leaving Jessica and Michael standing in our yard like children who'd just been grounded for the first time in their lives. Sterling stretched his wings wide and let out a triumphant squawk. Thompson property! Thompson rules! You have 24 hours to decide, I said. Accept our terms or walk away and never contact us again. But understand this, we survived your betrayal. We found purpose and healing. We don't need you. The question is, do you need us badly enough to finally learn what family actually means?" Jessica looked at Michael. Michael looked at the cabin, the mountains, and the steam rising from the springs visible in the distance. For the first time since they'd arrived, I saw something in their eyes that might have been shame. We'll need to think about it," Jessica said quietly. 24 hours, Robert repeated. "The clock starts now." We watched them drive away, their expensive SUVs kicking up snow on the road we'd cleared with our own hands. Sterling nuzzled against Robert's cheek, cooing softly. "Do you think they'll come back?" Robert asked. I looked at our beautiful cabin, thought about the healing waters, and felt Sterling's warm weight on my arm as he hopped over to me. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But either way, we'll be fine. Better than fine. We've already won."
1 year later, I stood on our newly expanded porch watching the sunrise paint the San Juan peaks in shades of gold and rose. Thompson Springs Wellness Retreat had 14 guests that week, people dealing with arthritis, chronic pain, stress, and various ailments who'd come seeking the healing we'd found. The sound of laughter drifted from the springs where early morning soakers were already beginning their day. Sterling perched on my shoulder, preening contentedly. At 36 years old, he looked healthier than ever, his gray feathers gleaming in the morning light. He'd earned his reputation as the retreat's guardian, greeting guests warmly and, on rare occasions, squawking warnings about people whose intentions didn't align with our values. Movement caught my eye near the equipment shed. Jessica, her designer clothes replaced by work jeans and a flannel shirt, was splitting wood for the guest cabins. Her hands, once manicured and soft, now bore calluses and strength. She looked up, saw me watching, and waved, a genuine, tired, but somehow happier wave than I'd seen from her in decades. Michael emerged from the guest lodge carrying fresh linens, stopping to chat with an elderly couple about the best soaking times for joint pain. He'd lost 30 pounds over the year, his face leaner and more alive. The corporate smugness had been replaced by something quieter, more substantial. They'd both chosen to stay. Not easily, not without resistance and countless difficult conversations, but they'd stayed. And the work had changed them in ways I'd never imagined possible. Sterling had been tough on them at first. For the first 3 months, he'd screech whenever Jessica approached the main cabin, forcing her to take on extra outdoor duties. It took 4 months before he'd let Michael feed him treats without protest. But gradually, as they proved themselves through consistent, honest work, Sterling softened. Now he'd occasionally perch on Jessica's arm while she worked the front desk, a sign of acceptance we all recognized as significant. Robert came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and resting his chin on my shoulder. "Penny for your thoughts?" "Just thinking about how far we've all come, how close we came to losing everything, and how much we've gained instead." The retreat was thriving beyond our modest dreams. We'd hired 3 locals from Creed, established a nonprofit to ensure the springs remained accessible to those in need, regardless of ability to pay, and created a model that balanced healing with sustainability. We'd never become the luxury resort our children had envisioned, and that was exactly right. Last week, after completing their year of service, we sat down with Jessica and Michael for a formal discussion. They'd asked not for ownership or profit shares, but for the opportunity to continue working here, as paid employees, earning modest salaries, learning more about stewardship and purpose. "We're sorry," Jessica said, tears streaming down her face. "We're so sorry for what we did to you. We can't take it back. But we want to spend the rest of our lives proving we've learned better." Forgiveness is complicated.
The hurt they cause doesn't vanish simply because they've changed, but watching them now, seeing them contribute meaningfully, understanding that people can grow even when we've given up on them, that's powerful. Sterling suddenly squawked, "Family! Real family!" and flew down to land between Jessica and Michael, who both laughed and offered him seeds from their pockets. "You know what I've learned?" I said to Robert. "Real family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about respect, effort, and showing up, especially when it's hard. It's about boundaries that protect love rather than enable abuse. And it's about second chances earned through action, not just words." Robert kissed my temple. "Your grandfather would be proud of what you've built here, Maggie. Not just the retreat, but the lessons, the healing that goes deeper than aching joints. Thompson Springs saved our lives, yes. But more than that, it had taught us that it's never too late to establish boundaries, demand respect, or rebuild on your own terms. That survival sometimes means walking away from everything familiar. That healing, true healing, requires both courage and community. If you're facing betrayal, if you feel unseen or undervalued, remember this: your worth isn't determined by those who fail to recognize it. Set your boundaries, demand better, and trust that sometimes the path forward leads through places you never expected, maybe even to miracles hidden in mountain springs, guided by the instincts of a wise old parrot. Thank you for listening to our story. If it touched you, please like, subscribe, and share your own experiences in the comments. Let's build a community where everyone's value is recognized and protected. Sterling has the last word, as always. Love real! Love real! The Thompson family is strong! And he's absolutely right.